Holidays are built for celebration, rooms full of laughter, clinking glasses, stories told over each other. But for quiet people, that noise can feel like a wall.
Holiday loneliness isn't about being alone. It's about emotional mismatch.
Welcome to our channel. Today, we are embarking on a deep exploration of a phenomenon that, paradoxically, peaks during the most social time of the year. We are deconstructing the pervasive myth that holiday loneliness is merely a result of physical isolation or a lack of company. Instead, we are looking at the data, which suggests that the most acute forms of psychological distress occur when individuals are surrounded by people, music, and celebration. We are going to unpack the science of affective mismatch, the friction that arises when your internal emotional reality is at war with the mandatory external performance of joy. This is not just about feeling sad. It is about the cognitive dissonance that exhausts the brain.
It is essential to begin by validating the invisible burden many carry right now. In clinical practice, I often tell my patients that loneliness is not defined by the number of people in the room, but by the quality of the connection available. During the holidays, there is a distinct societal script that demands high-energy positivity. When your internal landscape is painted with grief, burnout, or simply a need for quiet reflection, and you are forced into an environment of loud, performative cheer, you experience a psychological separation. You feel unseen. This is the core of the issue. It is not that you are alone. It is that the you who exists internally is not welcome at the party.
That concept of being unseen is fascinating when we look at it through the lens of social psychology. We often assume that the remedy for the holiday blues is to get out there and socialize. However, studies indicate that for someone experiencing depressive symptoms or even simple melancholy, entering a hyper-social environment can actually amplify feelings of isolation. It creates a stark contrast effect. It's like standing in a dark room and having a spotlight shined not on you, but on the gap between you and everyone else. The happiness of others becomes a measuring stick against which you judge your own internal state as incorrect or defective, leading to a secondary layer of shame.
Precisely, Jane. We call this affective mismatch. It creates a form of psychological friction. Imagine your emotions are a frequency. If you are vibrating at a low, slow frequency, introspection or sadness, and the environment is vibrating at a high, chaotic frequency, you are out of phase. To bridge that gap, you have to perform. This brings us to the concept of emotional labor, a term coined by sociologist Arlie Hochschild. During the holidays, we engage in massive amounts of uncompensated emotional labor. We suppress our true feelings to sustain the outward appearance of the holiday spirit, which effectively means we are working a double shift, managing our own pain while manufacturing joy for others.
The energy cost of that manufacturing process is something we rarely discuss. We treat faking it until you make it as a viable strategy, but biologically, it is expensive. When we discuss the neurobiology of this, we have to talk about the prefrontal cortex. This is the executive center of the brain, responsible for regulation. When you are forcing a smile or suppressing a sigh, you are taxing your executive functions. You are inhibiting a natural response and generating a fabricated one. This explains why, after a 3-hour family dinner where you felt disconnected, you might feel physically exhausted, as if you had run a marathon. The brain burns glucose to maintain the mask.
That exhaustion is a signal we often ignore. We interpret it as a personal failing. Why am I so tired? Why am I not enjoying this? Rather than a physiological response to incongruence. There is also the role of mirror neurons to consider. Humans are wired for social mimicry. When someone smiles, our brain prepares us to smile back to build rapport. However, when there is a mismatch between the external smile and the internal state, the mirror neuron system is firing, but the limbic system, the emotional center, is not sending the corresponding dopamine or serotonin signals. This disconnect creates a sense of uncanniness within the self. You feel like a ghost in your own machine, operating the levers but not feeling the movement.
It's incredible how the brain detects that inauthenticity. And it's not just about our own brain, it's about how we perceive others. When everyone around us is projecting this high-wattage holiday cheer, we often perceive it as effortless for them, which makes our own struggle feel even more isolating. But statistically, a significant portion of that room is likely performing the same emotional labor. We are essentially a group of people wearing masks, feeling lonely because we can't see the faces behind the masks of others. We are mutually reinforcing a standard of happiness that few are actually naturally experiencing in that specific moment. It is a collective delusion of constant joy.
That collective delusion is dangerous because it invalidates the spectrum of human emotion. The holidays, historically and seasonally, occur during the winter solstice in the Northern Hemisphere, a time of darkness, dormancy, and hibernation. Our biology is cueing us to slow down, to rest, and to reflect. Yet our culture demands we speed up, consume, and radiate energy. This is a circadian mismatch, as well as an emotional one. When you feel lonely at a party, part of that is your body rejecting the artificial acceleration of the season. You are craving the winter quiet, but you are being force-fed the summer mania. That biological rebellion manifests as withdrawal.
I want to circle back to the contrast effect you mentioned earlier, Alina. It reminds me of how light pollution washes out the stars. When the artificial lights of festivity are too bright, we lose the ability to navigate by our own internal compass. The loneliness stems from a loss of self-orientation. If I am sad, but the world says, be happy, I stop trusting my own feelings. This leads to a form of gaslighting, where the calendar itself tells you that your emotions are wrong. This is why the loneliness bites so hard. It's not just I am alone. It is I am wrong for feeling this way. That judgment is what turns solitude into suffering.
Yes, the judgment is the amplifier. In acceptance and commitment therapy, we talk about the difference between clean pain and dirty pain. Clean pain is the natural sadness of missing a loved one or feeling disconnected. Dirty pain is the suffering we create by struggling against that sadness, by telling ourselves we shouldn't feel it. The holiday season is a factory for dirty pain because of the tyranny of the word should. You should be grateful. You should be merry. These imperatives create a cage. The moment you accept that it is okay to feel hollow while standing under mistletoe, the loneliness loses some of its jagged edges. It becomes just a feeling, not a verdict on your character.
So let's discuss the neurochemistry of connection versus the neurochemistry of performance. Genuine connection releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone, which reduces cortisol and stress. Performance, however, monitoring your facial expressions, checking if you're laughing at the right time, keeps the amygdala active. It keeps us in a state of hypervigilance. We are scanning for social threats. Am I ruining the mood? Did they notice I'm not really happy? This vigilance prevents the very connection we crave. We cannot bond when we are defending. So the loneliness persists because we are biologically armored up, even as we toast with champagne.
And that armor is heavy. This is why we see a spike in post-holiday crashes. It isn't just the sugar or the alcohol. It is the release of holding a psychological pose for weeks on end. When we talk about affective mismatch, we also have to address the expectations of family systems. Families often operate as homeostatic systems. They want to maintain a familiar equilibrium. If you are the person who is usually the listener or the happy one, and you arrive with a different energy, the system resists. This rejection can feel incredibly isolating. You are with your blood relatives, yet you feel like a stranger because they are interacting with your role, not your reality.
It's a powerful distinction, interacting with a role versus a reality. This brings us to the solution-oriented part of our discussion. If the loneliness comes from mismatch in performance, the antidote must involve some level of authenticity, but that is risky. How does one navigate this without becoming the Grinch? It seems like we need a strategy for selective authenticity. We don't need to bare our souls to everyone, but perhaps we need to find 1 or 2 safe harbors within the crowd. A micro-interaction where we can drop the mask for 5 minutes and re-regulate our nervous system.
Exactly. I advise my clients to practice what I call authentic anchoring. Before you enter a social space, acknowledge your true state to yourself. Say, I am feeling low today, and that is allowed. Then, find an anchor in the room. It might be a quiet corner, a pet, or one trusted cousin who knows the truth. You don't have to announce your sadness to the whole room to be authentic. You simply have to stop lying to yourself. If you can maintain a cord of connection to your own internal truth, the external mismatch becomes less threatening. You are no longer gaslighting yourself, even if the environment is trying to.
I love the idea of authentic anchoring. It shifts the control back to the individual. It also suggests that we need to redefine what a successful holiday interaction looks like. Maybe success isn't, I was the life of the party, but rather, I honored my boundaries and didn't deplete my reserves. This requires us to override the dopamine-seeking drive of social approval. We have to be willing to be perceived as low energy or quiet without internalizing it as failure. It is a rebellion against the commercialized happiness that is sold to us in every advertisement from November to January.
It is absolutely a rebellion, and it requires courage. The loneliness you feel is often a symptom of self-abandonment. When you stay in a situation that drains you, smiling when you want to cry, you are abandoning yourself to please others. The ultimate cure for this specific type of loneliness is to return to your own side. This might mean leaving the party early. It might mean saying no to an invitation. It might mean sitting in the kitchen washing dishes because the repetitive motion is soothing and the noise level is lower. These are acts of self-preservation, not antisocial behavior.
This reframing is crucial. We are moving away from loneliness as a deficit and towards solitude as a restorative practice. But let's acknowledge the difficulty for those who truly have no one, where the mismatch is not between internal and external states, but between the desire for connection and the reality of isolation. Even there, the concept of affective mismatch applies. The pain is exacerbated by the societal projection that everyone else is together. Recognizing that the happy crowd is often an illusion can actually be comforting. It breaks the binary of me alone sad versus them together happy. We are all navigating complex emotional landscapes.
That is a profound realization to hold. The binary is false. The holiday season is a prism that refracts light in many directions, and shadow is a necessary part of that physics. If you are alone, or if you feel alone in a crowd, try to view your emotional state as a valid weather pattern. It is winter in your heart, perhaps. Winter is not a mistake. It is a season. It has its own beauty, its own necessity. Do not force the flowers to bloom in the snow. Let the dormancy be. When you stop fighting the mismatch, the friction dissipates, and you are left with a quieter, more manageable peace.
To summarize our journey today, we've identified that holiday loneliness is often a product of affective mismatch, the clash between internal reality and external expectation. We've explored the neurobiology of social mimicry and the high cost of emotional labor. We've discussed how the contrast effect makes us feel more isolated in crowds, and we've looked at strategies like authentic anchoring and redefining success.
The takeaway is that your feelings are not a malfunction. The friction you feel is evidence that you are trying to remain true to yourself in an environment that demands conformity.
As we close, I want you to carry this thought with you. You do not owe the holidays your performance. You do not owe anyone a version of yourself that does not exist. If you find yourself surrounded by lights but feeling dark, let that be okay. You are not broken. You are simply human, experiencing the depth of a complex season. Be gentle with your nervous system. Honor your need for silence. And remember, the most important connection you can nurture this season is the one you have with yourself. Until next time, take care.